the type of content that I make that I would have already made a video about the actual Danganronpa series. But nope, this is the first one. Hello everyone, it's Ocean Unknown and welcome back to my channel. As stated in the intro, this is my first video about a series that I've talked about many times on this channel, but it's never gotten its own video. Danganronpa. I've been in this fandom for over 7 years, but I've always been more on the fangame side of things because I have so much admiration for all the creativity of the people behind fangams like the Another series, The Heartless to Sea, Project Ian's Garden, and so many more wonderful projects. It's finally time for me to talk about the source material and what got me into this mess in the first place. The executions. This is the first video in a mini-series on this channel where I will be analyzing every single execution in the trilogy, so no Ultra Despair Girls or anime exclusive executions. However, if you'd like to see me talk about those, please let me know in the comments. This series is inspired by Weeby News, who did a series with this topic a few years back, but I wanted to share my thoughts on the Danganronpa executions as well. This video is about all of the executions in the first game, Danganronpa Trigger Happy Havoc. First and foremost, this video will have massive spoilers for the first Danganronpa game, so, as always, proceed with caution. Also, if this is the content you'd like to see from me and on your page, please make sure to like this video, leave comments, and subscribe to join the SeaBunnies. Without further ado, let's begin.
Trigger Happy Havoc begins with an execution. Blast off the execution of Jin Kirigiri. As the headmaster of Hope's Peak Academy before the events of the first game, Jin is executed so the killing game can commence. He is strapped inside a rocket as he is blasted off into space. The rocket plummets back down, and as the door opens, all that is left of Jin Kirigiri is a pile of cracked bones. This execution sets the stage for Danganronpa as a whole with its combination of over-exaggerated silliness and grisly horrible deaths and violence, and also with the introduction of the mascot of the killing game, Monokuma, as Monokuma is also a clear representation of the dueling concepts of Danganronpa with his split design. Blastoff and Monokuma's introduction go hand in hand as the beginning of the series. Jin's execution truly sets the plot in motion, since his death allows the killing game at Hope's Peak Academy to begin. The harsh fall of the rocket can also be interpreted as the fall of Hope's Peak Academy and the game's reality. Also, his own daughter, Kyoko, ends up in this killing game, which makes his death even more impactful even though Jin and Kyoko were quite estranged. Blastoff, while not the most iconic execution in the series or not even in this game, does start Danganronpa with such a bang. The next execution is the death of Mukuro Ikusawa, the 16th student lying hidden somewhere in the school, the one they call the Ultimate Despair. Watch out for her. Also known as the Spears of Gungnir. After violating the killing game's rules by stomping on Monokuma, Mukuro is impaled by numerous spears after Monokuma calls upon the Spears of Gungnir. For some mythological context, Gungnir is the spear of the Norse god Odin, and Gungnir is notorious for always hitting its intended target. At this point in the game, Mukuro is disguised as her sister, Junko Enoshima, as she is in on the killing game as half of the Despair Sisters.
I would also like to mention that Mukuro in kanji can be written as the word for corpse.
Mukuro's execution is much more minimal in concept compared to the other executions, which makes many people leave it out of the discussion of Danganronpa's executions. However, Mukuro's death has a lot of impact on the story of Trigger Happy Havoc. First and foremost, many people who have never played or watched Danganronpa likely know of Junko Enoshima, whether they've seen fan art of her, cosplays, or heard her many viral TikTok audios.
Anime is an important part of our culture!
Aw, look at him tremble! He's gonna burst a blood vessel because I dissed his waifus!
Anybody who doesn't know about the plot twist that the Junko we meet at the beginning of Trigger Happy Havoc isn't actually Junko would likely be shocked that she's out of the game this early on in Chapter 1. Along with the shock of the supposed iconic character of the series meeting an early fate, there's also the out-of-the-ordinary circumstances of Mukuro's death. At this point in the game, Sayaka had just been killed, and the first class trial was about to begin. The players and viewers are set up to expect the next person who will die to be Sayaka's killer after they've been exposed for their crime. However, Mukuro dies before the first culprit, completely deconstructing the setup narrative established so far in the game. Mukuro's death is meant to disrupt any expectations and sets up the twist of Mukuro's existence and identity within the killing game and the plans of the mastermind of the killing school life, Junko Enoshima. Lastly, Mukuro's execution is quite sad. She was betrayed and killed by her own sister, and Junko could have chosen to spare her life if she wanted to since she was in control of Monokuma. Even while losing all of her blood from the spears, Mukuro was still playing the part, speaking in her sister's dialect and pretending to be Junko to the bitter end. In addition, Mukuro was still used as a tool of manipulation by her sister post-mortem, which is especially seen in chapter 5. Also, I don't know if this is intentional or not, but Mukuro's execution may be a reference to a notorious moment in history. Let's see, what historical figure was also betrayed by someone incredibly close to them, and then killed by being impaled multiple times by sharp objects? Julius Caesar.
No, we should totally just stab
Mukuro. While Spears of Gungnir doesn't have the over-exaggerated flair of other executions, Mukuro's death has a lasting impact on the series and sets the precedent of plot twists for the chapters to come.
Now we're moving on to the first culprit's execution, the 1000 blows.
If you ask any Danganronpa fan which execution is the most iconic, chances are this is the one they would say. Sayaka's killer, Leon Kawada, is dragged by a metal chain to a room set up to be a batting cage, and he is strapped to a metal pole. A pitching machine begins to shoot baseballs at Leon, and the machine continues to speed up and spin around the pole he is strapped to. Monokuma, in a baseball uniform, joins in as he is hucking baseballs at a defenseless Leon, as he receives the final blow of multiple baseballs hitting his body. First of all, the Japanese name of Leon's execution is Senbon Noku, which translates to 1,000 knocks in English, which references a Japanese baseball training drill that requires athletes to catch baseballs until they collapse from exhaustion.
This execution is quite fitting for Leon, the ultimate baseball star.
Additionally, baseball players in the early years of the sport in Japan were motivated with phrases like practice till you die. From doing some research, I can make an inference that preparation, practice, and building skills and victories one day at a time is very important to Japanese sports. Brian Lifton from the New York Times states that baseball training in Japan has traditionally preferred strengthening muscle memory so pitchers can throw as many balls as possible, and calling Japanese athletic training practice happy. Furthermore, Robert Whitting from the Smithsonian magazine suggests that Japanese baseball highlights and enforces the importance of discipline, self-sacrifice, form over flair, and the overall concept that good athletes are made through rigorous training as opposed to being born with natural exceptional talent.
Now, you may be wondering why I'm giving all this context on Japanese baseball. Well, it's because all of this is the exact opposite of who Leon is, and his execution actively punishes him for this.
Despite the fact that Leon is the ultimate baseball star, he has a strong disdain for his title and talent. He wants to be a musician with his star quality aura and gain an ultimate title for that, even though he has zero singing experience and doesn't play any instruments, which illustrates how he doesn't believe in the idea that talent needs to be nurtured through training and hard work. He tells Makoto in their very first conversation that he's never practiced baseball once, and the second he got his ultimate title, he quit the sport for good. His free time events also emphasize how much he hates playing baseball, especially practicing, because he believes it's so easy. Even when he starts to miss baseball in his last free time event, he insists that he just wants to play, no practice whatsoever. On top of that, Leon is an incredibly impulsive, childish, and arrogant person, which shows in every decision he makes, from his decision to abandon baseball to his murder plan. He never prepared, or say, practiced, how he was going to escape the killing game, and thus he is being punished for both committing murder and also for never taking the time to prepare for anything in his life. The first class trial in this game is quite simple, not just because it's the first ever trial, but also because Leon didn't prepare for the aftermath of his crime. As the culprit's executions in Danganronpa are designed to induce the most despair out of the person being punished, Leon's execution forces him to die true to the one thing he hated the most and his avoidance of practice and preparation in all aspects of his life. The 1000 blows, as the first culprit execution, sets the precedent for all of the future executions in the series, especially with how specific this execution is for Leon. It encapsulates both his ultimate talent, personality, hubris, and fears, while also being incredibly brutal, and this execution is deemed the most iconic in the series for a reason. Now we're moving on to Mondo Owada's execution, the Cage of Death. Since Mondo is the ultimate biker gang leader, he is strapped to a garish and gaudy motorcycle and is sent speeding towards a circular metal cage.
A little detail is that the formal name for this cage in circus performances is the Globe of Death, which also explains the circus backdrop during Mondo's execution.
The cage gets powered by electricity as Mondo keeps going faster and faster around the sphere until the bike stops and Mondo is nowhere to be found. All of a sudden, a small machine starts dinging and out pops a small container of Mondo butter.
Exotic butters.
Mondo's execution is definitely on the over-exaggerated side of the spectrum of Danganronpa executions compared to the brutality of Leon's, but there's a lot of details to cover.
First of all, the inspiration of The Cage of Death is an offensive and highly problematic children's book from the early 1900s where a little boy gives his colorful clothes to a group of tigers who are all insistent that they look better than one another. Due to their disagreement and rage, the tigers chase each other around a tree until they are reduced to clarified butter. This story is also referenced in The Tigers on the Motorcycle and Bordering the Globe of Death, and the title of the book is written in kanji on the motorcycle Mondo is strapped to. Additionally, Mondo, like the tigers in the story, was arrogant and wanted to prove himself and show that he was the best. Before the events of Trigger Happy Havoc, Mondo challenged his older brother to a race to prove that he was worthy of becoming the next leader of his biker gang. However, during the race, Mondo ran face first into incoming traffic, but his brother pushed him out of the way and sacrificed himself to save Mondo. During the game, Mondo becomes very insecure, especially regarding his strength, which is what led him to kill Chihiro because Chihiro was constantly pushing to become stronger, especially while talking to Mondo. Now, regarding the butter, when I first got into Danganronpa, I genuinely believed Mondo got liquefied because his hairstyle looks like a piece of corn.
I just wrote corn.
And Monokuma at the beginning of this execution mocks Mondo's hair by wearing a matching wig. However, Mondo becoming smooth like butter like a criminal undercover is mostly connected with the aforementioned problematic children's book. In addition, there is a more emotional interpretation as to why Mondo turned into butter. One of Mondo's biggest insecurities is losing his strength and becoming soft. And what's more soft than butter? Many people have also tried to calculate if a human body can actually be liquefied through G-force and physics, so I highly recommend looking into those studies. Anyways, Mondo's execution connects his talent and his biggest fears and flaws together, and while it definitely is campy and over-exaggerated, it's one of those executions that sticks with the audience. Get it? Like a stick of butter? Next is my favorite execution in the first game, the burning of the Versailles witch. Celestia Ludenberg, the ultimate gambler, is placed on an elaborate stage in front of a stake, but noticeably, she isn't tied to the stake. The audience is filled with hundreds of Monokuma as the hay beneath her and the stage is set on fire. The music shifts to beautiful melodic harpsichords as Celeste is smiling in the face of death. But all of a sudden, a fire truck starts speeding to the stage, hitting Celeste head on.
So if you're watching this wondering, what the hell does this have to do with Celeste being a gambler? Well, this execution gives her talent the backseat and really hones in on Celeste's character and gives her the most despair as possible.
As shown during the Chapter 3 trial and its aftermath, Celeste's biggest fear was being ordinary. She created this whole persona of herself of Celestia Ludenberg to present herself as a much more extravagant and unorthodox person, but in reality, she was a simple girl named Taiko Yasuhiro. Both her love of Lolita fashion and the Victorian and Rococo eras of European history, and her intense hatred of herself, caused her to lie about her whole identity, backstory, everything. Makoto does in fact call her the Queen of Liars and says everything about her is wrapped in a veil of lies.
While it's likely just a coincidence, her believing she was about to be burned at the stake is possibly a play on the phrase, liar, liar, pants on fire. Also, this fake out of her execution method was also, in fact, a lie.
Celeste was sent to her execution under the impression that it was going to be tailored for her after seeing Leon and Mondo's, and went into it being content with her fate and excited to go out in a blaze of glory, pun intended. Her execution starts off completely different from Leon and Mondo's, with the music being more somber, the pace being slower, and the theatrics being more catered to Celeste's aesthetic and desires. The background of her execution even includes a castle, which she mentioned was a part of her biggest dream before her execution, and ironically, it's on a stage, which further shows how Celeste was just a character for her. However, the drastic switch up of this execution when the fire truck shows up represents a couple things in Celeste's story. First of all, her biggest desire of dying an extravagant and extraordinary death that is different from her predecessors in the Killing Game is dangled in front of her face, and the eccentric music and bright loud colors from the past executions comes back. The sudden switch up of theatrics in her execution could also likely symbolize the fragility of her ego and how she couldn't keep up this lavish persona, which especially shows up during the third trial. Her fake ambiguous European accent slips, and her poker face is nowhere to be found. Throughout the game, it's clear that Celeste feels the need to constantly be in control of situations, and especially of herself. Her execution makes it so she has zero control of what happens to her. Even though she wasn't restrained to the stake, likely because the witch burning was how she wanted to die, the flames engulfed her and the stage, so when she saw the fire truck, she couldn't escape. While she was trying so hard to live in her fantasy, even in death, the loud alarm of reality disrupts everything, and she is forced to die not as Celestia Ludenberg, but as Taiko Yasuhiro. Lastly, as she was hit by a fire truck, she dies in a way that would give her the most despair. Vehicular manslaughter is one of, if not the most common way for a person to die. Thus, Celeste died a normal death, which is exactly what she feared the most. Up next is Alter Ego's execution, Excavator Destroyer. Since Chapter 4 didn't have a culprit, Alter Ego, Chihiro's AI project, is crushed to pieces by an excavator controlled by Monokuma. The laptop is destroyed in an overkill fashion and is shaped into a black spear with Monokuma's left evil eye.
This execution is quite short compared to the others, so I have a little less to say about it.
Since Alter Ego is not one of the main students and is an extension of Chihiro, Alter Ego was killed as a special guest due to there being no culprit in Chapter 4. Because of this, one would argue that this execution lacks significance or emotional value. However, I disagree. Before the Chapter 4 trial, the remaining students were heavily relying on Alter Ego, especially when it came to figuring out how to escape or end the killing game. And to an extent, they had a reason to do so, as you'll see in the next execution, because they truly wouldn't have ended the game without Alter Ego. However, with Monokuma choosing to execute Alter Ego, he is further giving the remaining students despair, which is especially shown in how he transforms the laptop into a black ball with only the despair side of his face. Also, a fun detail is while Monokuma starts the excavator, we only see the despair half of his body, and the road signs also only featured the despair side as well. Speaking of despair, there's an interpretation of this execution that states that Alter Ego being crushed and molded into the symbol of despair symbolizes how hope in the killing game is continuously crushed. Alter Ego is one of the biggest symbols of hope throughout the game, especially with the green color scheme that contrasts the use of red in the story, which symbolizes despair. By crushing Alter Ego, Monokuma is further crushing any hope that the remaining students have in escaping and ending the killing game, and Alter Ego at this time in the game was the students' only key to finding out the secrets to the school and the killing game.
Also, death by getting crushed becomes a huge symbol for the killing game and the themes of hope versus despair, which is a perfect segue into our next execution.
Chapter 5's execution, After School Lesson, has two different versions and outcomes, so I will be covering both. In the bad ending, Kyoko Kirigiri is executed, but in the good ending, Makoto Naegi is meant to be executed, but Alter Ego hacks into the machine that is meant to kill Makoto, and he survives by falling down the garbage chute. Kyoko and Makoto are stuck, but not restrained, in a classroom setting on a conveyor belt as Monokuma gives them an after-school lesson, which just so happens to be the birds and the bees, as the conveyor belt moves them closer and closer to a trash compactor where they will be crushed instantly. There isn't a concrete answer as to why Makoto and Kyoko weren't restrained to the desks, but some people have theorized that this choice was to represent how students typically aren't allowed to stand up and leave, and the trash compactor represents the crushing, overwhelming stress of being a student. However, my interpretation is that the classroom setting and lack of restraints represents the killing game within the school. Now, even though Makoto and Kyoko tried their best to stop it with everything they had, it was no use. This makes more sense with Makoto, since in the canon story of the trilogy, this is his execution, with Kyoko's being the bad ending, with the remaining 5 students remaining stuck at the school forever, and then Toko dies for no reason. Anyways, this execution is meant to give Kyoko and Makoto the most despair before their deaths, so this execution is meant to remind them of the game they couldn't stop, and those two were the main people trying to end the killing game. As I'm going with the canon ending, and assuming this execution was specifically for Makoto, this execution does encapsulate his talent in a unique way. As the ultimate lucky student, the classroom setting can be attributed to the student part of his title, and we finally see his luck come into play as he miraculously survives his execution. He's one of the only characters in the series to do so, and that's especially impressive in a big, grand-scale, post-trial execution like this. Despite my interpretation that After School Lesson was specifically designed for Makoto, this execution also works for Kyoko because at this point in the game, her ultimate talent still hasn't been revealed. Thus, for storytelling purposes, she wouldn't have a detective-themed execution, as both the characters and the audience don't know she was the ultimate detective. The despair of both Kyoko and Makoto is the same, as there's the dreadful anticipation for when they're going to get crushed by the trash compactor, but Makoto surviving his execution brings us to Chapter 6, the final execution of Trigger Happy Havoc, the ultimate punishment. After the mastermind of the killing game, Junko Enoshima, is found out and she accepts her own fate, she commences her own special execution. A fun little detail is that unlike the other culprits that get dragged by Monokuma at the start of their executions, Junko walks casually with Monokuma to begin hers. She cheerfully waves as her execution is set up, and she proceeds to face a combination of all the executions seen so far, except for Spears of Gungnir, the execution that she initiated to kill her own sister. Throughout the different executions, she appears to be having the time of her life and completely unfazed by the hundreds of baseballs being chucked at her, the electrified motorcycle death cage, being hit by a fire truck. As she reaches the final execution, after school lesson, she stops smiling for a second and looks up at the compactor, either out of fear or out of boredom, and then the block comes down, killing Junko and ending the killing game. Since Junko is the mastermind of the killing game, her facing every execution that she brought upon the other students is very fitting. This execution also perfectly exemplifies what Danganronpa is all about: despair and over-exaggerating the harshness of the game situations. As Junko is the ultimate despair, she's trying to give herself 1,000,000 times more despair than anyone before her because she's obsessed with feeling despair. However, Junko is very easily bored, which is partially why she feels the need to inflict despair onto the entire world, because it's the only emotion that doesn't bore her. At the very end of her execution, when she looks up, she's either bored of her own despair and execution, or it clicks in her head that she's actually going to die. Her execution marks the end of the killing game, with the remaining students surviving, but the story of Danganronpa isn't over just yet. But that's for another video.
That's all I have for you today. If you liked this video, please make sure to give it a like, subscribe to the channel to join the SeaBunnies, and turn on the bell for notifications. Comment down below your thoughts on the first Danganronpa game's executions or any video suggestions for me. I'll see you all in the next video. Thank you so much!